With that, I will officially call the work session to order, and we'll let the minutes reflect that the entire board is here, as well as members of staff and some distinguished guests that we'll hear from here momentarily. We have the minutes of October 25th before us. We'll entertain a motion of approval on the minutes.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, the minutes will stand. Oh, I'll take that back. Seeing no discussion, I'll ask for a voice vote. Those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed? All right. So the minutes are accepted. Lisa, thank you as always. Nothing for monthly reports. This evening we have no public hearings. We do have a couple of different guests. And we'll start with Dr. Ken Boehm for discussion of Veterinary Hospital, 1467 Empire Boulevard. And I'll ask Mr. Costello maybe to give us a little bit more of an update. And
Thank you,
we'll
Tony.
move into discussions.
We do have Dr. Ken Boehm with us, and also his trusty architect, Dan Peters. The three of us have been working together now for several months, and they have prepared a set of plans for you. I also have sent you the initial email that Dan had sent me, so you got probably about 3 sets of plans there by now. I'm going to let Dan go through and talk a little bit about what they'd like to do and where they'd like to do it.
Thank you. So I did pass out 4 copies, sorry there's not enough for everybody, of updated renderings that I believe you have in your packet. And the update that's in the larger format I passed out today shows the site a little more accurately. Before, in the renderings that you got from Jim that I sent to him, it was just a flat parcel, and I didn't have enough topo information to properly articulate what's actually there and the amount of trees. So again, this is a representation. They're not surveyed trees and locations, but it gives you a good depiction of what's actually there. And then I also handed out 11 by 17s that are an update, just if you're curious to see floor plans and elevations of the same building, obviously that's in the renderings, just more scale information if you did have questions on heights and those kind of things that wasn't clear. But
Dan, not so much for the board, because I think they all know what you're discussing, but for the general public, can you talk just a little bit about where it is and what's there now?
yes, so the address, is, as you said, is 1467 Empire Boulevard. It's on the, would be the west side of Empire as it turns going up the hill. Currently, there is a single-family home that's there. It's green. There's a single-story garage as well that's separate, not connected. And there's roughly 5.3 acres, sorry. 3.3 acres total.
What's the closest intersection?
The closest intersection, I forget the name of that
Plank
road. It would be Plank, yeah.
You mean the south side of Empire?
It's the north
Well,
side. Across
So
from
you
the,
said west side. I don't think there's a west side.
Well, north is actually up. Empire turns,
Yeah.
and
Okay, where it
at this
turns,
location, I know it's tough.
It's next to
Got it.
the
It is
Middle Roof
actually
Outlet
Middle Roof
Company.
Got it.
Yeah, so,
You're still
I was
here.
going to use Stone here, but
I was
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
get there
so-
tonight, but I didn't get that one.
so actually Stone Yard's parking parcel is adjacent to this parcel. And to me, it feels south, but by the arrow, it actually
Got it,
isn't.
yep.
So it's just the parcel south of that, which somewhat envelops the metal roof outlet. Ken's property goes to the back side of that and downhill side of that. All right. So currently, there's a bunch of conifer trees, evergreens that are directly close to that parcel, the Stone Yard parcel in the back where they park, which we're trying to preserve. And further down the hill is where the house is, and it's just enveloped in a lot of trees that are there now.
It's hard to see the house from the road.
Right.
And I have some pictures that, unfortunately, they're on a
We
flash
thought we
drive
were
without
going to be
the-
able to
Yeah.
But
plug in
the
digitally
house
here.
is, it's over 100 years old. I think it was built in 1900. I don't think anything's been done to it. I think I talked to Jim one time, and he said, we got nothing on this house because they've never done anything to it. It's in a serious state of disrepair. There is a lot of solid waste on the premises.
Does anybody live there? This is
There are a couple people that live there, and yeah, it's not any place anybody should have to live.
I mean, I always, when I hear about 100-year-old homes, you want to save those kind of, but you're saying.
This is.
Yeah, this is not one of
I don't
those.
think this is salvageable, and if
Ship sale.
I can certainly forward the pictures to you, and you can
No,
take a look
it's
at it. It's in a pretty serious state of disrepair.
So what the design is it's a story and a half, I'll call it, because it's a partial second story, but it's a footprint of around 3,000 square feet. The second story is around 800 square feet or so. Full basement. And we are looking to put, I think it's about 18 spots on the south or downhill side for parking. And we really want to try to utilize the current curb cut, but improve it as required for, what we're going to be doing. Obviously now it's not wide enough. As you do approach into the curb cut that's there, you're kind of you're going upside a little bit, so it's too steep right now. And we propose, and I don't have grading information, we are about to get that, but we would propose removal of some of that hill to flatten things out a little bit, and try to maintain as many of the trees as possible that are there. There are a few smaller scrub trees up front we got to take out to clean up. I think the town just put a sidewalk up through there, so we're gonna just clean that whole area up. But some of the more mature trees we're gonna prune up, and we want to keep them as they are. Also, that isn't in here, but just for discussion, between where we're siting the building and the neighboring property, we want to have a dog path or a walkable path throughout the trees that are there, because a lot of times that's, part of the process of trying to have a pet, get recovered, as well as a grieving path through there for,
People
instances where...
euthanizing their animals. Sometimes it's nice if they can just take a little walk. If we're running a little behind, they got a place where they can walk the animal around.
So, and that's kind of why we situated things where you currently see.
So it's in the name Laurelton, I mean, that sounds like Roundacourt, is it?
So that's currently where my hospital is. That's on Empire Boulevard, up about a mile on the other side of the bay. Just I bought it about 17 years ago, and I expanded a little bit, and it's just the lots are small, and there's not enough room. I don't need to have a great big animal hospital. In fact, I don't want that. I want to just have a small, quaint animal hospital. But getting in and out, traffic, it's just not really feasible. And I also like what's going on at Baytown, and it's developing, and where the current hospital is, there's been a little bit of crime, nothing too serious, but if I could find a parcel that I could move to where I wouldn't lose any of my old clients, and maybe it's a little safer, a little bit nicer, it's kind of what I was aiming for, and this place seems like really ideal.
Is the second floor going to be utilized for like a living purpose, or?
Just an office or
Office
two,
space.
and a break room for the staff.
And not shown in here, we're pursuing potentially solar on the roof, and we would aesthetically show you what that would look like. We're trying to be conscious of that, and there's alternative ways for energy. We're looking at maybe even geothermal, we haven't gone down that road yet, but right now we're talking to some solar folks to see how we would outfit the roof to fit the panels on there, and the slopes are somewhat designed to accommodate that, you know, where you're going for longer overhangs and, you know, just the aesthetic of trying to be, you know, inviting and not these really tall spaces that feel, you know, don't feel good. So, you know, that's we're picking materials as well just to walk through that are, you know, warm materials. We have some stone out front. There'll be some heavy timber as well as cement board siding. The basement will be out of block. The overhangs would be stained wood. And then the inside, again, that warm feel will bring on the inside as well, just to talk about that a bit.
Doctor, how many partners or how many docs in the?
Currently, I don't have any partners. I'm a sole proprietor, but I got a couple of vets that work for me.
Okay.
Not necessarily full-time, maybe about 2.5
Do you have
docs.
boarding?
I'm sorry,
Do you
no
board?
boarding, no.
Do you have a groomer?
We do not have a groomer,
She has a dog.
but if only we had more room, we could perhaps fit that in somewhere. So, we're actually not zoned to board because where my office currently is, it's mainly residential, and they don't want barking animals that
Sure.
you know,
Sure.
throughout the day. So,
And typically, you know, and I don't want to get too deep here because this is just a general overview here, and then we'll go on to the next step. But typically, during any given week, hours of operation.
you know, in at 8, out at 6. You know, I got a life, I got kids. I don't want to be burning midnight oil and doing surgeries at 10 o'clock at night and all that. So we may go a little later if we had an emergency or something, but that's certainly not my intention.
Weekend hours?
Usually we just do half a day on Saturday.
Got it. All right. Great. Board, questions,
Jim, this is
comments?
just for the record, this is before us because this is in the sales letter.
That's correct, yeah.
As opposed
Yeah,
to-
we should have mentioned that earlier on for the public, yes, that's right.
It doesn't require a use, does it require any kind of use variance or?
No, not a use variance, it will require a conditional use permit from you if you decide to move forward with the site plan review.
New building,
One thing to mention, I know you're looking for comments from the board, but just so you know, one thing to mention, we have an offer into the property and it's contingent on some approval. Obviously, we're not here for approval, but we want some kind of thumbs up that, you know, this looks approvable as we go through the process, you know, so that we can feel comfortable that this is going to happen.
Yeah, and you know, I think we could provide a valuable service to Penfield residents, and I think we could take a piece of property that perhaps is not as optimal as it could be, and you know, increase the value of that. I grew up for a while in Penfield, went to Plank Road South, lived on Creek Street, which is just the house.
Around the corner.
Yeah, just around the corner. Again, I think it's nice what's been done with that area. I can remember. Man, I remember when they put that CVS in
Oh, yeah.
Baytown, and
Me
it was
too,
just a
yeah.
field, and I can remember driving through that field on that rutted road, and you know, like it's really developed into a nice area, and it'd be nice to be a part of that.
Right, board, other questions, comments?
No.
Sir?
I'm supportive of the
Yeah.
platform.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Staff, anything in addition to what we've discussed or we should have entered into the record?
No, it's very preliminary, obviously, and I think they're just looking for, you know, some support on your part. We can do a letter if you'd like, stating that you've reviewed it and find it to be something that you could move forward, if that helps you in any way.
I think that would be good. I would entertain a motion to direct staff to prepare a letter of support for the
I
project.
move that we.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay.
Okay.
Any additional input for the board at this time that you'd like to provide us?
We're going to move forward with trying to finish this thing up and submit it for permit.
Great.
That's good.
Excellent, excellent. Mr. Costello, we'll get a letter out to you here over the next week. The offices are closed on Friday, so probably early next week. And so with that, with motion and second, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you. All right, good luck.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you for your time. All right, the next item is the next guest that we have, Peter Vars, requesting fill and grade permit, 777 Panorama Trail South. This is actually the second time that we've had the opportunity to see Mr. Vars for this particular property. He came in once before at a high level to talk about a roadway. Now he would like to address the board in a little bit more detail around the property. So, we have Rich with us as well. And so with that, actually, what I'll do is I'll just ask staff, is there any comments, input? I know you did bring this before PRC, and give you an opportunity.
I think we'll let Peter kind of give the overview of what's going on.
We'll review whatever he says.
We had some technical comments, and I shared those with Peter earlier. He can kind of give an overview of what they're looking to do. Obviously, they've already changed it once. They came in last week with a concept. Staff had some concerns. They've reduced the impact and the scope of what they're doing, and then we've got some technical comments on it. Should the board look to move ahead on.
Right. Good. Well, good evening, everybody. And yes, and Rich Lafroy's here, one of the developers of the property, because when we were here back, I think it was in September, we talked about just doing improvements in this area, which was really just bringing the road up through the area, and the town board saw the logic behind that and graded just that permit. And so, meeting with Rich and with Dutch Summers, we got talking a little bit more. And Rich, bringing his knowledge to the table, said, the words he used, which is so good, he goes, Rochester is a show-me town. And because if you recall, the reason we were doing this is what Dutch wanted to do with having these 50-plus acres amassed together. He wanted the ability to be able to get potential tenants up there, let them see what the site has to offer. They envision something like of a Linden Oak style development of that type, of using the terrain and whatnot. But in thinking of this, if you get up there, it's really hard to envision that. So we got thinking about, we said, well, there's some plateaus in here that maybe if we could just open those up so that the potential would be there to see potential building pads and building sites. Because ultimately, we do need to come back here. We have to handle zoning, we have to handle site plan review. But it's kind of what is the best approach without knowing who the tenants are. So what we wanted to do was modify, I guess, or request a new grade and fill permit from the one that was issued back in September that would allow us to expand it into these two areas here. They're pretty natural plateaus that exist out there. Just to give you an idea, this is a sloped area. There's about 45 feet of elevation difference between here and here. So we would retain that slope, retain the vegetation on there. This represents total of about 8.5 acres of clearing. The original plan had about 5 acres. So we're looking to expand about 3.5 more acres of clearing out here. And then just to basically grade it out to level it off, but really maintaining the top of slopes up here and the bottom of slopes here. And we would work with the PRC on all the technical issues, erosion control, restoration. It is the intent that once this is graded off, it would be topsoiled and seeded and restored, and then be able to be used by Rich, by Dutch Summers, to see prospective tenants so that we can start formulating the true development plan and make a formal application in the future.
So Peter, if you would, because we do have folks that watch in,
sure.
Would you just kind of give us
where we are?
Yeah, exactly. Again, I think the board has seen it, but again, I think it would be just helpful, for those key reference points.
Yep.
You got a piece of Nalgene, we got Allen's Creek off,
Exactly.
one corner.
We have everything.
And everything, and we do, and the expressway and a few other things.
So along here, north is up. So along here is Route 441. And so right here is Panorama Trail South, okay? What you see here is the southernmost part of the Thermo Fisher Nalgene parcel. Their facility loops back in here. This is the pond and the structures. This is Camp Hakama, okay? So Camp Hakama's here, and then these are the southern limits of Allen's Creek Valley townhomes here, This is the trailer park that forms the western boundary. So they accumulated about 55 acres here from Thermo Fisher, from Camp Hakamo, and then the original parcels, which are off this map, and I apologize, were the original 5 acres of what were known as the Hilton Hotel properties that were approved back in the late 90s. That was where this project all started, adjacent to the Popeyes restaurants. That's the frontage that they have on Panorama Trail, and then they also have an agreement where they are improving the roadway so that they'll have a defined connection out to Panorama Creek Drive, so they can utilize that point of access to Panorama Trail also. So the intent of what this is there's an existing roadway here that served Camp Hakama. It's to continue to use that, and there was an old construction haul road. That's what they want to utilize to access this part up here so they can, in their terms, open up, or Rich's term, show potential people of what the development potential of this property could be.
Can you talk a little bit about the cuts that you're making and why you're doing that?
Sure. What we did here, what these 3 areas are, is really 50-foot wide strips that would be cleared. They would not be graded, but it's to show the depth of the property going back, to give, again, people the thought of how far we go back. Because one thing we did not want to do, because we know we don't have a defined development plan, was to go in and grade the entire property. We're smart enough to know that the board would not look upon that without knowing exactly what would be built there. But we wanted to give potential tenants the thought of what, how much depth's there. What we did do is we stopped them all 100 feet from the property line, which is basically, given current zoning, which is industrial zone, that's the buffer that would have to be maintained to adjoining residential zone property. So, we don't know what will happen there, so we said, we're not even going to disturb what we know is a zoning buffer for now. So that's why they truncate at that area there. So it was just, for the west side of the lands, that's how we wanted to open those up to view, was without grading, but just to give a view of, this is how far back the lands go in this area here.
So a couple of questions, Peter. You've got an area just to the west, right there.
Yep.
If you could describe what that is, and then I think what else then would be helpful is that you talked about the fact that when we originally spoke in September, you were looking to impact about 5 acres. This proposal, you're looking to impact about 8 acres, and just
8.5.
8.5, and then just talk just a little bit about, when you'd like to get started with
Sure.
that, and then, I'm guessing you're going to talk about maybe stripping what topsoil might be there, putting it off to the side, then doing your work,
Yes.
and then putting that back on and seeding it.
Yeah, so that's what this area is here. It is a natural level area right now. That's where we would stockpile the topsoil that would get stripped off of this area. That's the temporary stockpile, such that then when the grading is done, it would get placed back on, and then everything is seeded. So we're not doing any grading here. It would just be to stockpile the topsoil temporarily while we do the work here. So, I'm sorry, the second question was?
Well, the second question was just more about, once you've stripped it off, you're gonna do a certain amount of work, and then you're gonna reseed, put the topsoil back, reseed.
Yeah, so the grading work on these larger areas is really no more changing the contour of the land, no more than 2 to 3 feet. Okay, so it really is just to level it off, and then this topsoil would get redistributed, everything would get seeded, would get restored. From the work we did in September, we already did obtain from the DEC the coverage under the stormwater permit. We prepared the necessary stormwater pollution prevention plan for the work that was originally proposed up through here. We would have to modify it because we'd have to show the increase in disturbance from the 5 acres to the 8.5 acres. Staff will review the technical side of that, but we'll do all of that to make sure, obviously, that we comply with both the local standards and the state standards. We were issued an EPOD permit because it is a woodlot. That would have to get modified to adjust for the areas. One thing we did do, staff did pick up on the fact in this area here, There actually are some hardwoods there. There's some white oaks and cherries. Those have all been located by our surveyors, and those are shown on the map and shown that they are outside of the clearing limits. In other words, we're leaving those there. We did go through here and do a tree survey to be sure the areas we are proposing to clear now don't contain any hardwoods, any mature woods. It's a lot of successional growth. It is to be, again, because we don't know what the end game is here. So we didn't want to get too far down the path. As relates to a schedule, this is work that we would like to do through the course of the winter. And that was part of the reason of expanding the plan, for lack of a better way to put it, was to take advantage of the season, which is move the earth in the winter, less susceptibility to erosion because of the temperatures, and the precipitation is snow rather than rain, those types of things. But then also, more importantly, once it gets stabilized, then it's allowed to settle, for lack of a better way to put it, and then it's more ready to be developed in the future. So that's their schedule.
Peter, you have identified a specific area for grading. Is it your intent to do that in terms of just opening the area up, or is that what you're looking for, is pretty much your final pad area for any future development? Is there any other areas that are around that could be expanded out, or that you intend to expand out?
From what we looked at conceptually, there are definitely other areas here that we believe can be developed. I think the numbers we've come up with, out of the 55 total acres that have been assembled here, I think we're estimating around 33 of those acres could be developed.
Right. I'm just thinking about this particular area here that needs the grading.
So these two areas here, we don't see those really expanding that much further. This area here, and that's part of the show me component, is this area is pretty level. We're just going to basically smooth it out. It really almost becomes pad ready. That now, when we're talking to a potential tenant and somebody says, you know, I'd like to do this type of a building or whatever, we can sit there and say, well, how does that fit in here? Here's the pad. Now in this area here, we have a lot more flexibility, but again, we don't want to get too far down the path here without telling you what we're doing. Case in point, the Hackamore lands, obviously, something can happen there, but we're going to leave those alone. And then there's this area here, again, that we believe has the grades that were allowed to be developed, but we don't want to do anything with that right now. It's more just, we wanted to just open up the top, because that was the area that we think people will have the hardest part envisioning what its potential could be. And the key to all of this was, which was the main revision from a week ago to today, was really working with the existing grades that are there. So it's more of a clearing permit than it's a grading permit, to be honest with you.
So, discussion?
Time to hear maybe from Mark and...
Yeah, I said, my staff and I took a little nature walk last week. We walked the property up and down all over, and that was, you know, to Peter's credit, modified. We had concerns about that steep slope area. There was some initial idea just to kind of open up this whole area, but I think there's some nice view potential off that area, or at least until you know what's going on, to preserve that. And then Peter and his team again identified the larger trees. As we walked, there were some significant, more mature trees that were kind of at the edge of that area. He identified, showed that it's out of that. Most of our comments are technical about the road. Questions about whether it would be dedicated in the future, just more planning, and we discussed this afternoon, if it's at 8% grade and everything else. We just wanted to make sure when they're doing this, they're putting the haul road in, is whether they're installing it per spec at that point in time, and we should be out there inspecting that, making sure it's installed to town specs and everything else, or this is merely just an access road to get people in and out, with the thorough understanding that, obviously at such a point in time, if it did become dedicated, they'd have to, hog that material out, make sure it's properly graded, there's drainage with it. We'd be looking for a turnaround at the end, which they're going to need anyway. So some discussions at PRC today about making sure if we had to get an ambulance up there is no structures at this time, but at least if something happened, you can get an emergency vehicle up, turn it around, bring it back down. We may need a bump out area. If there's two vehicles coming up and down, they could pull off, but nothing logistically, they handled the piece we had the biggest concern about was, clear cutting that slope and then just grading that out. The others were technical about, construction related, and obviously we'll look at the erosion control, as we move ahead. As Peter shared, we already looked at the stormwater design. The pond that's down here wasn't put in place for the Hilton Hotel. They're looking to use a lot of that for their stormwater control as it runs down the hill. They've already submitted that stuff to us at the previous board's grading fill, so we reviewed it at that time.
Do you feel they answered the questions that you?
Yeah, we had a conversation just this afternoon, so obviously those tweaks aren't added here, but can be. But the biggest thing I think is to show this one pad and then have a separate pad at the top. I think you'll have some great views off of that. It's a significant slope that goes down there, and preserving that. That's kind of what I have a feeling of the Linden Oaks or Linden Tack is. You drive in, you kind of have a pad area, goes up a slope, you have some mature trees, and then you kind of go up to the next area, and it feels like you're kind of tucked in, and rather than just clear cutting that, and they were very open to modifying the plan to show that. And once you get into a final design, obviously that that may change, but just on EFCOM, we had a little concern about just clearing that all out and losing that, without knowing what the final design would be.
And just so you know, I know Tony's taken the effort to call the president of the Homeowners Association of Elms Creek Valley. Mark and I actually met with Jim Patakowski, who's intended to be the next president, I suspect. We spent some time with him today and went through, or yesterday, went through the entire program with them, and I think they understand that we're trying to keep them apprised of what's going on. And at some point in time, I'm sure Rich will go out and meet with them and let them know what the intent is, so that they understand what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay. Other discussion, board members?
Is there any kind of privacy or something? I mean, to keep people out? I mean, you're gonna have.
Yeah, I mean, we'll obviously put a gate across the end of it just to keep people,
Keep the honest people honest.
Right.
Exactly. Okay.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
No, I certainly support moving forward with this. I think it's a good use of the property. Mr. Lafroy has a lot of buildings around town, and they're well maintained. Aesthetically, they look really nice, and I look forward to future use in this property. If you're thinking a Linden Oaks kind of atmosphere, I think that would be received very well by me, and I certainly support the process moving forward.
Okay, great. Would entertain a motion of support for them to move forward with their essentially what I'll call clearing and grubbing, and some amount of actually grading, but a lot of clearing and grubbing more than anything else. So I'd entertain a motion for support of that.
Move.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded, and then what I would ask staff to do is, to properly document that with a letter back to the applicant's engineer, so that they've got it for their records, we have it for our records, and we'll move forward with that. Obviously, one of the conditions would be, certainly, following any and all the recommendations from the PRC component. It sounds like it's already been discussed anyways, so there's no surprises. All right, those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you very much, as always, and look forward to seeing how this starts to shape up here as we head into 18 and beyond. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Sometimes I'm blown away by how Andy participates in this.
Okay, so we will move on to action items. The first item we have is a license and hold harmless agreement at 23 Naples Circle. Mr. Costello is handing some information out from Mr. Mike Noto. So with that,
Come on to the table.
Mike, welcome.
Thank you. We have Mr. Noto with us this evening. Mr. Noto recently moved into property at 23 Naples Circle, which is off of Barrett Road. He applied for and received a building permit to construct an 8-foot by 10-foot shed. The shed was installed. There's a picture here, and you can see the building permit, I think, was nailed to the front door of the shed, if I'm not mistaken. So in any event, it was determined later on that the shed actually encroaches into one of our drainage easements, and you see his house is to the left of the red line. The red line is actually a drainage easement. I'm sorry, it's a sanitary sewer easement. The blue line in the back, which encompasses pretty much all of his backyard, the shed was actually installed in a portion of that just beyond the deck area. And you can see that in the other pictures that I took. Unfortunately, there are manholes everywhere. He does have it placed over a line, but what he did was he actually put it on a stone pad. The stone pad allows it to be movable. It's not affixed to anything, so it could be moved. He fully understands the fact that the shed, if we ever had to go in, and I'm hoping that we won't have to do that for quite some time, or none of us have to be dealing with that, but he understands that the shed can be moved either by him or staff prior to work, and that he would be responsible for moving it back in the event that the staff couldn't do it, or didn't have time to do it. So he understands the limitations. He's willing to sign off on a license and hold harmless agreement to ensure the town is held harmless, that his responsibilities are identified in the agreement. There really is no other place for him to do that. As a matter of fact, at one time, there was a sanitary easement on the other side of the house, which was recently abandoned by town staff as we relocated the sanitary system to the other side of the house. So
So you originally had easements encumbering
We were here a few months ago and
Yeah,
I
right.
brought it in as abandoned. It was the one
Exactly.
side to free up a little bit of their property.
Sure.
The utility had switched to the other side of the house.
he did place the shed so that it's not over the easement or the manhole to the furthest part or the southerly part of the property. So it is movable. It's not affixed to anything, and it's a small one. He actually is entitled to have 192 square feet, which would be 12 by 16. He went with an 8 by 10 square foot shed, so I think he's trying to minimize the impact as best as possible.
I have no concerns with doing this. And I would
No, I'm
move that we
good
do
too.
so.
All right.
I feel second.
It's a really
So
good
it's
service.
been moved by Paula, seconded by Linda, and that would be to direct staff to prepare a resolution for our next meeting on the 15th to allow this structure in that easement area. Seeing no further discussion, those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Hopefully that was the most difficult part of your day.
Easier than moving the shed.
I'm retired, what else am I gonna do? Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time, we appreciate it. All right, so we'll move on to the second item. This is a sidewalk waiver at 1530 Old Penfield Road.
Hello, Mr. Vars.
Mr. Vars stuck around this one as it's
Really, like
He's
Groundhog
got a
Day.
different, he's got a different tie in it.
Yeah, exactly. We did a quick change.
This is orienting the group Penfield Road along this bottom side of the plan, Old Penfield Road. Ellison Heights is in the middle, and obviously Manitou Lake or Redmond Lake on the north end of the property. Amy Tate now owns the property. She intends to put her house, I put a little kind of rectangle and an X where she's looking to put her house kind of out on that point.
Oh, okay.
She has an application currently pending in-house for the house, and then I didn't put the barn on there. A barn, a parcel, if the board wants to see it, we can put that up. So obviously she's at 1530 Old Penfield Road. It's actually a Penfield Road address. It loops around there. I highlighted in red what we have for sidewalks today. So coming out of Ellison Heights, we have sidewalks on the south side of Old Penfield Road that start at their exit, so they'll have sidewalks internally. It runs down across the bridge at the bottom and then ties in down behind the Brookhill Apartments. On the other side, Penfield Road, we installed a piece across the bridge where it crosses Ronnequoit Creek, and then most recently Ellison Heights installed it up to their property line on the west side, and it leaves us a small gap, the Dolomite property, and then there's actually just a short piece in front of Gentles. So we're kind of looking at, we'll fill in those gaps, coming up with that. So staff had looked at it. This is kind of turned sideways from what the map you're looking at. There's the house, there's the garage, the limits of the pond going around. This is the Old Penfield Road frontage here. So the upper area on the plan, this map shows where the old building was with the concrete the trucks were up above and then the road that went down, and the house is kind of in a similar location of where the old processing plant was for the concrete down below.
So,
So,
Yeah. I was just saying, why wouldn't we have a sidewalk there? I mean, that's a tough turn as it is. There's a sidewalk that goes 2/3 of the way up the hill.
the sidewalk is not on that side. The sidewalk is on the near side, so there is no sidewalk on that side of the road.
Right.
Uh,
No,
And it falls off, so I think, there's other sidewalks in the area that I think are more critical, and I tried to show the gaps on Penfield Road that I think would be...
are you thinking because it's private property versus?
No, I'm
Destination.
just that the sidewalk is on the opposite side, so you come out of Ellison Heights and the sidewalk is on this side of the road up to
Right.
their entrance in here.
Yeah.
It comes out and then runs down this side of the road. This side of the road falls off quite quickly.
Drops right off the other
There's-
side of
There's
the
a
road.
fence, there's a fence and drops off. I think either a sidewalk on this side of the road going up, eventually you'd have to do some wall work as you kind of go up Old Penfield Road. Or I think more critical is up on Penfield Road is filling in the Dolomite piece, and then the piece in front of Gentles would now allow the people up on Penfield Road access down to Panorama Plaza tops and everything else. So the outside curve in that area, PRC looked at it, there's really not anybody that it's going to serve with that.
So what they would, they would have to do for sidewalks, you're saying that you recommend that instead of doing it there, that we have it fill in the pieces
A
that are
contribution or to
existing?
another location or another area, I just think
To me,
it's...
that makes sense because-
It's more suited.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about this with Gibbs and, whether we establish a value to that.
Yeah.
Just along her frontage, one, it's very difficult, and two, it only would serve her property, it really doesn't
You
have a
want to
benefit.
fill in those gaps, there's a lot of people walking down.
That's, we looked at it as,
Central Road.
that's why I kind of try to highlight in red, showing some of the other areas that I think are, more critical that, I think would serve a greater need for the residents in that area.
I would agree to that.
And I'm guessing staff would not recommend the taking of any easement on that side either.
We didn't see any future need for it. Obviously, if this property redeveloped into something much more, we did look at this for mixed use.
Then it would come
You'd
back.
have another bite at the apple, they'd come back and they'd want to do mixed use or much denser development. We can look at if there's, a betterment to having sidewalk easement at that time. Right now, it's a single-family house, kind of out on that point. It just didn't have
Right.
any draw or any...
The other issue, it is a lot like the Gibb property, you got a lot of frontage. Our policy currently is $500 for installation of the sidewalk. We can't put a lot of the sidewalk in because it's just not reasonable to put it there, it's just going to fall off the side of the slope. So the question really is, without the policy that we were proposing to revise yet, we still have that $500 issue or the installation of sidewalks on the site.
So in fairness to the applicant, and not of any fault of theirs, that's something that we have not flushed out. Our current practice, our current policy would be to take an easement, provided it makes sense to take an easement. What I'm hearing from staff is taking an easement along there really would not serve any purpose. If down the road that property were to be developed into something more than what I'll call a single-family home, as you said, that we could certainly take a look at that. So I think the recommendation on the table would be for waiver of the sidewalk, collect the $500 for the lot for that area, and again not require an easement on that opposite side.
But I think to put in a caveat, should this property further develop in the future, the board reserves the right to revisit the sidewalk waiver and the installation, or, just, there's a lot of property down there, there's a lot of potential, so I don't think, at least staff isn't just to waive it off forever, but just say at this point in time, it's a single-family house, is that an undue burden to put in? It's over 2,000 feet of sidewalk that, is not an easy at-grade sidewalk to begin with. But then they have a caveat that if it does develop in the future, that, this board reserves the right to, to relook at that and whether easements or further contribution, at that point in time.
Okay. All right. Comfortable with that, board?
Yes.
All right. Comfortable, someone like to make a motion for that?
I move that. Yes.
By Linda?
I'll second.
Second by Paula. And any further discussion? All right, those items that we discussed for, certainly the future component, no easement at this time, but holding that, at least in case something further develops down the road, payment of $500 for that. And so it's been moved and seconded, and see no further discussion. Those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a
Thanks,
good night,
Peter.
everybody.
Thanks.
You too. That brings us to item C, Shadow Pines Golf Course SEQRA, and just an update with that. So as the board is aware, we did have a resolution and hired the services of CNS Engineering to be our environmental engineer for that. The determination was made that it was a type 1 action. This board did designate itself as lead agency. We went out to take a look at involved and interested parties. We made the determination that the only involved agency was the town, and therefore any interested agencies did receive input from the engineer to make them aware of what we were looking to do with the Shadow Pines Golf Course as part of acquisition. CNS prepared a full EAF, and that has been submitted to the board for review. All of those comments have been collected and fed back to the engineer. You're also aware that we rendered the services of environmental legal review, and currently they have reviewed that, and the information now is back to us, and looking for this to be a neg deck again on the acquisition of the property. And the next step would be for the board to authorize development of a resolution at our next meeting to formalize the SEQRA component and continue to move forward with the process of acquisition of Shadow Pines Golf Course. Questions, comments, certainly staff, any input or comments from your end that I may have missed?
I think you covered it. It relates just exclusively to the acquisition.
Exclusively to the acquisition.
Anything
That's
else
correct.
later on would have to be reviewed through SEQRA again.
Okay. So if everybody's comfortable, would entertain a motion to have staff and Decorowitz prepare a resolution for the November 15th town board meeting for the completing the SEQRA process.
I'll move.
Okay, it's been moved. Second.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. Further discussion?
And I just would like to again, thank you, Mr. Supervisor, for your efforts in getting this going as quickly as possible. I know this town board has spent a lot of time trying to expedite the purchase of the property as quickly as we can within the legal parameters that we're obligated to act under. And, I'm satisfied moving forward, and I appreciate you getting the engineering firm up and running, and the staff, their time putting this at the top of their priority list with everything else that you guys have going on. And look forward to this moving forward at the next town board meeting. Thank you.
Great. Excellent. All right, being no further discussion, those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you very much. That completes our agenda. There being no further business to come before the November 8th, 2017 work session, the meeting will stand adjourned at 7:56 p.m.
Right.